All right, we are live. Oh. This. All right. This way. Okay. Thank you all for coming. We're at the town hall, Clark County, for Brad Meyer. I met Brad in January at the Floyd County Women's Caucus and was inspired by his thoughts and his ideas. And I said, how can I help? So I've been helping with his campaign ever since. So want to just ask if everyone could put their phones on silent if you haven't already. And then we have sign-in sheets that we'll be passing around. Just make sure you sign in before you leave. And then to make sure everyone has a chance, we ask your question and then make sure everyone's had a chance to ask a question before another round of questions happen. And before you ask your question, if you could state your name, just so we know who's asking it, if we need to get back in touch with you for anything. I think that's it. With that, I'll introduce Brad Meyer.
Thanks. I'm Brad Meyer. I'm running for the U.S. House of Representatives. So we've had 14, I think, of these town halls spread out all over the district. And the reason is that we have concentrated in the urban areas and we need to reach out across all 18 counties. So, and we need to be able to communicate on a variety of issues. And that's why I'm running. I'm running because, frankly, I am desperately concerned about the direction that this country is going. And there are a bunch of economic issues, and there's economic issues that we can talk about here, and I don't want to get too much into policy in this brief introduction. And many of us are being dragged closer and closer to poverty and financial instability, whether it's through healthcare or economic policy and what businesses are and aren't allowed to do. And it's like in Gulliver's Travels with all of the very fine threads, hundreds and thousands of these threads kind of holding us down. But the reason I quit my job was because there is a huge log chain being strewn across us, holding us down, and that is the attack on our basic democratic principles. And you see this in the inhumanity in our immigration policy. You see this in 2 attacks on foreign countries without congressional input. You see this in the pressure on the press to report things the way the government wants. You see this in the removal of oversight and taking information away so that we can't see what's going on, right? So we have to stand up, and we've got an election coming up in May 5th for the primary for the Democratic. And then in November. And it's critical that we take back the House, right? And part of that is a good example of one of the things that may impede that is the SAVE Act, which was coming through, and then it looked like it was dead, which made me happy, and then they resurrected it. And you know, there are those who say, well, it's not a big deal. If you just follow the laws, it's no big deal. And that is what they have said generation after generation after generation as they have tried to suppress voting rights. And the basic idea in our democracy should be that we need to remove as many barriers as possible so that as many people can vote with a minimum amount of fraud. Right? And what they're really doing is they're trying to squeeze it down more and more, that instead of really attacking any fraud issues, they're really just trying to suppress the vote. So anyway, so questions? It's a small group. Go ahead.
Can
Yeah.
you talk a little bit about healthcare and your thoughts on how we could fix the problem that's bankrupting people in this country?
So the answer is going to be universal nonprofit healthcare, single payer. There are 3 phases in that. The first phase is we have to stabilize our service providers, so the hospitals and the doctors, and that needs to be done through immediate legal action. And I think that that has enough popularity that it could happen relatively quickly. But just doing that and just fixing the ACA things that they have done will only take us back to 5 years ago or 10 years ago, which was still a problem. And it's not a long-term solution. And the real long-term solution is single payer system, like they have in, pick a number, 38 other countries. 4 billion people are covered by it. And in that, they live 4 years longer. They have half our maternal death rate, half our infant death rate, and people don't go bankrupt. Okay. In the United States, 70% of bankruptcies include medical debt. 80% of people that are carrying medical debt have insurance. So even having insurance is not going to relieve you of the threat of financial instability, even if you have good insurance. So we have to stop pussyfooting around. We've waited 80 years to get single payer systems. And people have been saying for 80 years, we just got to go slow. And slow really means no. It's a stalling tactic, and we have to stop that. Have any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
My name is Sarah Wallace. I'm from Floyd County. Okay. I guess my question is less about the policies and more about, it seems like people are on such extremes that getting these sort of policies pushed through is very difficult. How do you see working with or other Democrats, your peers, and then even here in Indiana, where it tends to be more red, more Republican, but I still think we have so much more in common, but we can focus on kind of what we don't at times. And it just seems like things don't happen. We talk a lot about what we want. And I think the Democratic Party does that a lot. Great ideas, and I agree with them all. How do we work with everyone, though, to actually start to accomplish some things that really impact the day-to-day of most Americans?
It's a good question. And it really comes down to how are we going to work across the aisle? And so there is broad agreement for a lot of these things. So there's broad agreement in the general population that we need a better healthcare system. For example, you were talking about healthcare. It's actually popular. And for the first time, 50% of doctors are also in favor of a nonprofit system, right? The only place that these things are really polarized and stuck is actually in Congress. Right? That there's a lot more, as you said, there's a lot more in common and a lot more consensus than what that it would appear. And one of the things that I am trying to do is to really think about how I'm approaching and discussing these issues. Right? One of the other things that have come up in discussion recently is immigration. So, for example, immigration, the Democrats tend to frame it as an issue of compassion, which it is, and the Republicans frame it as a legal issue. And there are laws, But I think we need to begin by saying, what's in our best interest as a nation, and start by a discussion with economics. And if you take it out of the framework in which we've been locked and arguing and stuck for so long, then maybe you can begin to reach across the aisle and find common ground. And I think that on healthcare and immigration in particular, there is an opportunity for that kind of better understanding and reaching across the aisle. And that doesn't mean softening our positions. It doesn't mean adopting their ideas. It just means talking about it in a way that helps them, the other side, understand why it matches their values and why it's in their best interest to go along. Other questions?
And Becky, I have a stepdaughter who's transgender, and since she has come out as transgender at the age of 47, she's been very happy. And we wanted to meet her and her children in Mexico over Christmas, and we were not able to do that because she was afraid that she would not be let back into the country. So, what would you suggest? How do we protect our LGBTQ friends and family members?
So this is one symptom of a multifaceted approach to try to suppress rights. And there are laws on the books for many of these things, for the ID, and the ID is a big issue, so we'll start with that one. What is the purpose of an ID? An ID is so that you can look at the picture and look at the person and say, yeah, that's the same person, right? And if we try to force IDs that have gender and picture associated with what they had at birth instead of what they look like, that's not going to help, right? And if you really want to start from it has to be at birth, then why not force us all to have a baby picture on our ID and say, this is the way you were at birth, okay? Practically, it doesn't make sense. And, in my comment to you, I was talking about, not softening our positions, but at least framing it in a way that people can understand that view things differently. And there are people that view things differently. What it really comes down to is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, okay? I don't have to understand, and the people, even the legislators, don't have to understand why somebody is transgender. They only have to understand that they have a constitutional right to life, liberty, and pursuit of their happiness. And I shouldn't be defining what that looks like.
We have an online question.
Okay.
What is your position on the war in Iran, and do you support this war without having congressional approval?
No, I do not support this war without congressional approval. And even if Congress did approve it, I have real questions and concerns about the necessity of it. This is the second military action, and I believe it will not be the last military action that this administration takes that puts troops in harm's way without any oversight. And we can find money to bomb and attack people, but we can't find money for a universal child care program, right? Which is probably going to cost about as much as this war will in the next, in its first 40 days. So it really comes down to what are our values and what are our priorities, and oversight by Congress. And Congress is not doing their job.
Question. My name's George. By all sources, Indiana is in the bottom 20% of the states and voter turnout. Like we're 41st in the nation. A lot of people that I've run into, especially young people, and I'm saying young, I'm saying the under 35 or the under 40 group, say it doesn't matter. The Democrats and the Republicans are all the same. What message and or strategies would you use to get more people in that age group to vote, regardless of whether they vote Republican or Democrat, but that they do participate in the electoral system?
So there's a lot of pessimism among people under 35, and they have every reason to be pessimistic. If you look at their economic circumstances, and I went through this in the last one, so I won't bore you with all of the details again, but um, the uh, the cost of living has gone up dramatically for everyone, but the burden, the education cost burden has gone up significantly, and um, the cost of living for the big three, which is housing, transportation, and food at home, has gone up from about 45% to 55, 56%, 58, I think. Um, and on top of that, in the last couple of decades, the average income for somebody between 18 and 34 has gone down in real terms by 34%, or sorry, 20%. So they have a reason to be pessimistic, and they have a reason, frankly, not to vote, because over 25 years, it's been both Democrats and Republicans in office, and this is part of a long slide. And this is part of those thin gossamer wires that are tying people down economically. And especially for young people, it is hard to get started. They have burdens that others don't. If we want them to vote, we need to give them something worthwhile to vote for. And I don't think that saying that, well, we've compromised and next year is only going to suck about as much as last year did, is going to get them off the couch. It's not going to inspire them to vote, and it doesn't give them any rational or reasonable belief that their life is going to get better if they do vote. We have to give them a choice.
Can I give you a follow-up to that?
Sure.
What specifically would you propose?
See that one more time.
What specifically would you propose as new policy legislation that would appeal to that younger group to get out and vote and support you or any other candidate that had these beliefs?
So number one, a $20 an hour minimum wage. Number two, first $20,000 of income tax-free. Number three, the first year of college for qualified individuals should be free. And part of the reason for that is that there are many young people who they go to college for a year or two and they acquire debt, and then they go, this is not for me, right? So what they end up with is debt, but not the benefits of the degree. And then the other thing is that since 1970, there has been a concerted attack on higher education, and the cost of higher education has literally gone up by a factor of 10 in real terms. In today's dollars, it has gone up by a factor of 10, right? So education, they're being priced out of education, and we need to reverse that. So there's a lot of things like this that need to be addressed.
Thank you.
We have another online question. Do you believe the current Supreme Court of the United States is functioning as a neutral judicial body? And if not, what concrete steps would you take in Congress to address that?
So no, it is not being a neutral body, and it is not, I think, representing the real will of the people. And in Congress, I have an opportunity to vote on Supreme Court when the next one comes up. It is hard constitutionally to affect the Supreme Court outside of affecting the makeup. That's why voting for Congress is so important, because it has a significant impact in the Supreme Court.
I have a question. This is Tracy, and my question is, with all of the evidence that's been shared with the Epstein files, we have seen many other countries take immediate action on that, but yet nothing at all seems to be happening in this country. What are your thoughts or ideas on holding the people in power accountable when things like this occur?
So Congress, very slowly, but Congress did pass a law saying that they have to release all this material. And now they're slow rolling the release of the material, which is not surprising. Right? So there is such a thing as contempt of Congress. And that needs to start being used, because Congress is not doing their job. Okay. And they do have power. They've got the power of the purse for the war in Iraq, or I'm sorry, in Iran. They've got the power of subpoena, and they have contempt of Congress. And they need to start wielding it. The problem is that this Congress is aligned with this administration. So it's not that they're not doing their job. It is a conscious decision they're not doing their job. Okay, and that's why we have to switch this Congress to Democrats. Is there another question? Yeah.
Sorry.
Not sure exactly how to ask this, but I know this question is related to wealth tax. And I know in California, they just passed some legislation and now they're saying people are leaving California and going to Texas or Florida. What are your thoughts, position, ideas on like a federal type of wealth tax so that we could potentially fund some of these programs better, and then people wouldn't be able to leave, excuse me, state by state. It would just kind of be a more kind of national, federal program.
So if we're going to do a wealth tax, it would need to be at the federal level for the exact reason that you're talking about. It puts states at a disadvantage when they do that. And you're seeing some of that now. I have not looked as closely, and I need to look more, frankly, at the wealth tax to make sure that it would be implemented in a way that generates the revenue that we need and does not choke off our economic growth as a nation, right? So there's a balancing act. You know, one of the main things that I have talked about is that when we talk about taxation, I don't view it as a punitive thing. Right? I view it as we start, number one, with what is it that we want and need as a nation, what matches our values and our priorities, how much does it cost, and how do we fund it? Right? So if the answer was, which it's not, if the answer was that nobody should have to be taxed, then okay, fine, then I'd say nobody get taxed. But as it turns out, people are going to have to be taxed, right? And the way it is tilted right now, taxes on the wealthy aren't as high as they need to be in order to meet our needs. And that's why we have a budget deficit. We're not bringing in enough revenue. We need to fix that. And wealth tax is one way of doing that. Tariffs is another, but there are significant downsides with tariffs, right? And if we're going to use tariffs, that is part of Congress's job, right? So wealth tax is an important option. Increasing income tax is an important part of it. And we need to get the money we need to do the things we need to do, and not more.
This is Megan. I'm a millennial with young kids and have at times been known as a non-voter. And your platform makes me really excited for hope for my children in the future. What policies do you think you would put in place for those of us who are already drowning in medical debt and house payments, and those things who are disenfranchised and drowning?
Yeah, and that is kind of the crux of where we're at, right? Is that people are being trapped in financial instability or risk, right? So the people that already have medical debt, I have not honestly thought about what needs to be done about that. And unfortunately, I don't have an answer off the top of my head of how we would address that. It is the same question and same issue as what do we do about people that have college debt, right? That's going to need to be thought through, and I'm going to have to do some more research, quite frankly. As far as housing goes, housing is also kind of a thorny issue. We have, when I bought my first house, the average house price was 3 times the average income for an individual. Now it's up to 5 times. And the main reason, frankly, that housing is such a large affordability as an issue is that, number one, there was a lot of speculation in the market. There aren't enough houses in the market. So we need to reduce the speculation, which means companies should not be buying single-family dwellings. Okay, single-family dwellings are an investment of families. It is not an investment of corporations. Okay. Number two, we need to build lots more housing. We're millions of houses short of what we should be in the United States, and that's one of the reasons that the costs continue to go up. So those things will take time to bring those costs down. In the short run, getting into the housing market for young people is difficult, and that Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, those types of programs have been helpful in the past and probably need to be more helpful in helping people because of the cost now. The down payment is increasingly burdensome, and that's a barrier. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm Jasmine Walston, and every so often I'll turn on Congress and watch a Senate hearing or a House hearing or a floor, somebody arguing for their legislation. And there's 2 things that strike me. One is that I'm talking about how I want this bill passed, and there's nobody in the room. They're just talking to the camera, and there's nobody listening. And that always makes me very uncomfortable well, how is anybody paying attention to the points being argued? The other thing is in the Senate hearings and in the House hearings is just how nasty people are. Some of these hearings, the Congress members or the Senate members are just using nasty, filthy language, attacking the people who came to speak. And now, with Trump in office, some of his people are being just as nasty to the senators and the Congress people. And I don't know how anybody talks to anybody and comes to consensus and makes reasonable decisions when people are so very nasty to each other all the time. And what do we do to improve get people to be nice to each other. And there's so many people saying, well, this is a Christian country, which it's not. But if you believe it is, why don't you act like a Christian? And then all the other major religions of the world have similar ideas about treat people with respect and with dignity. Could we maybe do that at Congress? And how will you bring ideas to make that happen when you're elected?
I think that's an excellent question. And I'll tell you that one of the things that I have tried to stress is that I'm going to fight for our values. And I've talked about that. I think it's on the camera right here, fighting to protect. And I've spent some time, talking to the people on my staff about how do I strike the balance? Because when I'm talking about fighting, I'm talking about fighting to make things better. I'm not talking about being disrespectful and hostile, right? And there's a question of how do I communicate that I'm going to stand up for what is important and disagree without being just mean and disagreeable. Right? And so I've thought a lot, and I've tried to be careful in my tone about how I frame things, how I talk about things, and I'm not saying that all of these people on the other side are evil. I think maybe a few of them are, but there has to be a base of common respect and decency. And I hope that I portray that in the way I communicate. And I hope that people don't misunderstand me when I'm talking about fighting, that I'm not just interested in brutalizing and being profane and rude, because that's not, in the long run, what gets it done. And I think that goes back to an earlier question that you had as well about how do we bring people in? And I don't think being shrill is going to be the answer, but we need to be firm. So.
Question.
Sure.
Report came out earlier. George here. A report came out earlier this week that at the current rate, Social Security will run out of reserves by 2032.
Mhm.
That's 6 years. For us old guys, what remedy to this would you offer if you were elected to Congress?
This is actually an easy one. Okay. It really is easy. It's shockingly easy. So when you look at payroll taxes, there is a cap. The maximum is, I think, about $170,000. Anything over $170,000 is not taxed. Okay. When you look at the percentage of, and that cap has been changed over time, but if you go back in time, that cap was once lower, and I don't remember when it was, but 30 years ago, when we were facing this the last time and tried to kick the can down the road, about 90, I think 95-ish% of all income was underneath the cap. Okay. And now, and I don't remember what the number is, but it's more like 80% is underneath the cap. So the cap has not kept pace with the distribution, okay? And if you want to preserve Social Security, just remove that cap entirely, and I think it'll stabilize it for like 30 years, okay? Now, 30 years is not a permanent long-time solution, but 30 years will probably help you. Okay, and in the next 30 years, we're going to have to do some things that'll help me as well, right? But it's a good start, right? And what's going to happen is they're going to tell us that we need to change how long, what the retirement age is, and we need to accept less, and we need to do this, and we need to do that. And basically, it is just the people over that cap don't want to pay more. And we're going to have to pick between people working longer or removing the cap. Welcome. You have a question?
I'm just listening to this one.
Okay. All right. Very good.
We have another online question from Ruth. She says, when I talked to Brad in Madison last year, he said he would not use genocide to describe what is happening in Palestine. Does he still think that way?
So this is a hot question. And the last time I was here, it was also brought up. So I am not using that terminology. And I understand that the role, and I understand that some people are bothered by that. Let's begin with where there is, I think, agreement. Number one, I believe that what is happening now, I believe it is gratuitous brutality that is happening in Palestine. And there is cycle after cycle after cycle after cycle of violence and repression and response and violence and repression and response. The only way to get out of this is through a two-state solution. And the United States needs to be applying pressure to both the Netanyahu government and Hamas or other leaders in Palestine to sit down and come up with a two-state solution that's viable. It is the only way that we will break this cycle of violence. And the issue with the terminology is that the framing and the terminology that's used by activists is a quick sorting process. So you use that terminology and you can sort people into believing, you believe like me or you don't. And it activates some and it separates others. And that's the role of an activist, and they should not stop doing that. And they should continue to apply pressure. In my role, which is different but complementary, I have to reach out to the people that have been sorted out as other in the activist process and convince them that our position matches their values and interests. And to do that, I need them to listen to the whole story. And when I use the terminology of an activist, they shut down and say, I've heard this before, and they stop listening to me. And for an activist, that's okay. For me, if I'm going to provide leadership and help people in Southern Indiana understand why a two-state solution is the right answer for everybody involved, we need to do that. Okay, so I'm not in opposition. I am in a complementary approach.
We have another online question.
Okay.
How will you hold the administrations accountable for appointing unqualified individuals to lead critical agencies like the EPA and the Department of Defense? And what concrete steps will you take to prevent political loyalty from outweighing expertise?
So we got into this mess because Congress didn't provide the oversight that they should. Right? And it is clear that many of the things now that they're in, many of the things that need to be done, contempt of Congress and hearings and pushing back and cutting budgets, all of these are tools that we can and should use. And in the future, we have to vote for qualified people and not vote for unqualified people. The reckoning needs to happen with Congress. These unqualified people are symptoms of a Congress that is not doing their job and is not accountable to the people.
We're just on fire.
Yeah.
Kind of piggyback on that last question there, Brad. I heard a talking head earlier this week actually say that there may be a silver lining to the Trump administration in that he has shown us where the loopholes and the flaws in our Constitution, our laws, and our norms and our mores may be. Now, if that is true, and if you're elected to Congress, what would be one of the first things you would do to help close up these loopholes that he and his cronies seem to be using to avoid playing by the rules?
So the easiest answer is to say, I would enact a bunch of new laws. Okay. And the fact is, do we really need a bunch of new laws? And the answer apparently today is yes, we probably need a bunch of new laws, but we're not following the laws that already exist. So papering over it with a bunch of new laws that can be overlooked isn't the answer. The answer is that we need to hold the people accountable we need to defend our constitutional system against those that think they are above the law. Okay. So there needs to be hearings. There needs to be prosecutions for the people that have broken the laws that we have. I am deeply frustrated that many of the laws that we have on the books and many of the things that through political negotiation we have worked together to find that balance in our nation, they've just set aside, right? And we need to make it clear that this is not acceptable, and we need to prosecute the people that are breaking the laws we have. And there are maybe a few holes that we need to fill in. I have a couple of suggestions for constitutional amendments. I think there are some systemic problems that this has brought up and shown. Somebody here who should go nameless was talking to me about maybe it is time we have a fourth branch of government that is responsible for independent oversight, which I had never considered before. It's an interesting idea. I'm not advocating for or against because I got to think about it. But begin with accountability.
Thank you.
Tracy, I have another question.
Okay.
I think we've seen the damage that the overturning of Roe versus Wade has done across many states, Indiana being a big one, Kentucky being another one, which is just south of us. I just saw an article this week where a woman who was married, trying to have a child, miscarried, and on her way to the hospital, this is in Kentucky, miscarried. And then the hospital asked her, where's the fetus? And she was like, I'm bleeding. I rushed to the emergency room. They called 911 and police showed up because of her miscarrying, basically. So that's the state that we live in right now. It's not right that a pregnant woman in Texas can bleed out or die and not get care because the physicians are scared to death to help because they might be arrested for saying they're performing abortions when they're really just saving the life of the mother. But yet you can go to another state and get care. So what can we do? What would you do nationally to ensure that what happens with a woman who is pregnant happens between her and her provider?
So I would support legislation nationally to push back against this. But because of the way the Supreme Court ruled, it ruled that this is a state, not a federal issue. And they did that on purpose, specifically to tie the hands of the federal government. So the federal government cannot intervene in the way that you should want and expect me to do as your representative, right? They've removed those levers of power to a high degree. Now, I'll pull any that I can and any that can pass constitutional muster, but they have made it clear and they have framed this as a state's responsibility. Number one, in my constitutional amendment proposal for universal health care, or that healthcare is a constitutional right, then the federal government can re-engage very strongly in that, right? So people need to vote at the state level. Their state legislatures are dramatically more important than what they realize. And this is just one of those examples. I wish I had a better, stronger answer that I could give you, that I could follow through on that promise. But I really believe that because of the way the Supreme Court ruled, it's going to be a long slog unless we have a constitutional amendment for healthcare. Yes.
Hi, thank you. So I spent a lot of years in the restaurant business. I worked with immigrants from all over the world. We counted on them. We needed them. We needed them for positions that, young college kids frankly weren't interested in. I drive around and, just a few days after we had a big buildup of ice, I was on a major road in Bloomington, Indiana, and there was a road sign advertising in Spanish for plumbers. So clearly we need these folks in our country to do a lot of work that we just don't have the workforce for, frankly, because, we have a lot more old people than we have young people at this point. So what would you do to help facilitate the folks that need the work coming here to provide labor for all of these businesses that need workers?
So this goes back to the earlier discussion we had about immigration and actually about the framing and how we talk to people. So immigration, I think the most success we're going to have getting to the point that we get 50% plus one to vote in favor of immigration reform is going to be to frame it around economics. If you look at the labor participation rate, you talk about the fewer people working, the labor participation rate in the United States has been going down for the last 40 years, right? So this is not a local trend. This is not a Democrat or Republican. This is a demographic trend in the United States that a smaller and smaller percentage of people are working or in the workforce, okay? We need workers in order to keep our economy growing, and there are people that want to come in and work. So the answer is economists need to estimate how many people we need. And if we need an additional 1 million workers this year or next year, then we need to make sure that there's at least 1 million approved visas for people to come in and work. And right now we don't have that. So there was somebody that was telling me that their son-in-law was Canadian, came into the United States, but it took, I think, 6 months and $10,000 to $15,000 for a Canadian to come into the United States and get married. A lot of the labor that we need, $10,000 in 6 months, doesn't make sense, okay? We have a lot of people that have come in undocumented or have overstayed their documentation, and they're being productive members of society. The rules are punitive in saying, I don't like the way you got here, which I can understand the complaint, but we say, you got to go back. Well, that doesn't help us. Okay, set aside whether it helps the immigrants or not. it doesn't help us to force all of these people to go home and reapply through a system that doesn't have enough visas anyway. The reason that many people are coming through undocumented is we don't have a documented route that makes sense that people can come in and help us. And when we don't provide legal routes, it brings them in through unofficial ways or undocumented ways and leaves them vulnerable. And we need to be more respectful of them as we're bringing in workers we need.
We have a couple online questions.
Okay.
We'll start with one from Katie. What is your position on additional aid to Ukraine?
I believe that it is important and in the best interest of the United States to continue to support Ukraine.
All right. We have another question online from Ruth. Ruth would like to know if you know this quarter, who are your top 2 donors? And thank you.
Yes, I know who my top 2 donors is. That's an interesting question. So
For context, Ruth also asked the question about Palestine and Gaza. So I think she would probably be referencing APAC.
okay, all right. So that is a different question, separate but related. So I have not and will not take any APAC money. And I have no intention of taking PAC money from organizations that are not aligned with my positions and values, right? So, and I know that a lot of people, they want to have a cut and dried thing. They say, I will not take any PAC money. Well, okay. I was talking with my my fundraising lady last night. After I win the primary, it's going to take raising $15,000 a day to win this race. $15,000 a day. That's a problem. And I have put out a position on environmental. And if an environmental lobby looks at my positions and says, that's exactly what I feel, and they want to donate to the campaign, okay. But I can't take money from AIPAC because I've come out against what Netanyahu's government's doing. So I can't be allowed to get bought off in that way. Next question. You still thinking?
Still listening.
Okay. All right.
Good.
All right.
Go again here. So follow up on the last question about PACs and money. We've all talked about dark money, Citizens First,
Citizens United.
United. Probably isn't going to change much of that. Would you be in favor of publicly funded elections?
I wish that was a practical solution. My concern is that right now, as the most progressive candidate, if Trump has shown, you talked earlier about laws, being skirted and set aside. Frankly, if his administration had any influence or control over public funding for elections, then I wouldn't get a single penny and I'd get locked out and I wouldn't be able to run. And you say, well, but it would be independent. It's like, well, independent like the FDA, independent like Health and Human Services, independent like the auditors, or independent like any of the, like the National Science Foundation, or independent like the Kennedy Center. I mean, it just the fact is that we have seen in unscrupulous leadership that independence can be a mirage and can be distorted. So yes, it would be wonderful if we could have a public funded system, and preferably one that doesn't require you to raise $15,000 a day just to run. Okay. I'd much rather be spending my time talking to constituents and hearing from them and trying to drum up support than trying to drum up money. But I can't trust this administration. And I think that it's a cautionary tale about setting up a system that somebody else in the future could choke off. Oh, another one? Oh, yes, ma'am.
Hold on.
With the damage many believe was done to the United States global standing during the Trump administration, do you think it's possible to restore America's leadership and credibility on the world stage, and how would you work towards that?
The damage that has been done is enormous. And I was talking with somebody that lives in Europe after the first Trump administration. And I said, okay, Trump is gone, Biden is in. Are we good? And she's like, no, because we do not believe that Trump is not going to come back or somebody like him is not going to come back. America has shown a perspective that has broken down relationships, and we've got trust issues. And Trump has come back and completely proven that position right. So that now, when I was younger, we stood up against a powerful nation that tried to take over another nation because it was an oil-rich country, right? And it was George H.W. Bush that said that we are, that beacon of light and the protectors of democracy, where the powerful respect the rights of the weaker. We've become that danger in society that we once stood against. That Republican president put together a coalition when he saw a threat to the world order and an abusive, aggressive member of the world community. And he built a coalition and he pushed the Iraqis back. Now we have acted pretty much unilaterally with Israel's help, and we have no allies. We spent the last year sticking our thumb in their eye, and now we're saying, hey, we started this war and the Straits of Hormuz are closed off. Can you pitch in and help us? It's like, our allies are saying, we didn't start this. You didn't consult us. We could have told you that it was a bad idea. So there is a lot of rebuilding that's going to need to be done, and it's going to take decades to repair the trust. And it's going to have to start with the American people remembering that how we deal with our friends and allies is important. And these are long-term relationships. These are not, how do I get the most out of it for the next quarter? And these short-sighted policies are going to cause enormous harm over the next decades.
So this is Tracy, kind of follow up to that. Specifically what they did in Venezuela, kidnapping their leader, trying to force who they want in, saying, we'll take care of that country in the meantime. Now Cuba is basically under attack. I've seen it's horrific conditions, a blackout of the country. We've cut off oil. And he's again saying, well, we'll take over Cuba. They can't control and do anything right in our own country. So I don't know what makes them think they can go in and do something right in Venezuela or Cuba. But what are your thoughts on kind of, again, with we're just going and doing all these things, specifically with like the Cuba situation right now? Because I know that's really hot. What, in your opinion, should we be doing or not doing, I guess, in that situation?
So So I've spoken on this before, and there's some information on my website and also in some reels and Facebook. What we're doing, this president and this administration who said that we want to stay out of foreign wars is militarizing our culture. And you've seen this through multiple actions, even before the military action, setting aside the actual overt things that we've done, saying that we're going to change the Department of Defense to the Department of War, telling all of the senior generals that they should practice in American cities. Hegseth saying to those same group of generals that we don't believe in any stupid rules of war being anything that they disagree with or anything that interferes with them. Hegseth saying that, he'd give orders that there's no quarter. Politicize or threatening Congress people because they dared to say that you can't, that you shouldn't follow illegal orders, which is in the Uniform Code of Justice. You're not supposed to follow illegal orders. And then the most recent thing, and this is a small thing, but the new coins that are coming out, and I don't know if any of you have heard this or not, in the seal, the Great Seal of the United States, the eagle has 2 talons. Well, they pretty much all of them do, unless they've been wounded, right? But it has 2 talons, and one of them has an olive branch to symbolize that we want peace. And the other one has arrows, meaning that we will fight. During the Civil War, they, and this was on purpose, I'm sure, they took a lot of the olive branches out, and they took some of the fruit off of the coin. Right. And they put in, I think, maybe fewer arrows. During World War II and any of the other times, none of them have ever put in, there's never been a time that we don't have the olive branch as part of our core ideals. And they're taking it out this year. Okay. They are militarizing our society. They have even come out and said that they want to change Veterans Day, which is to honor the veterans, to Victory Day. They are focusing us on war, and we need to resist this.
Like I said earlier, I'm a mom of small children. I often think of gun violence in locations. There are times that we are in places where it's just in the back of my head, whether it's a movie theater or a grocery store. There are other times where I am concerned enough that we take a pause in the car first and make sure we know what each other's wearing in case we need to split up. And it's been a part of their lives since they were very, very young. And I am sick and tired of thoughts and prayers. I don't want another thought or another prayer. I want action. So what steps would you take to help ensure that gun safety is something that's being utilized in a safe manner to keep our kids and other people safe?
So this is another example where, there's broad agreement everywhere except Congress, right? So 80% of people agree that if you're on a terrorist watch list, you should not be allowed to own a gun, okay? And I think, 65 to 70% of people agree that if you are a danger to yourself or others and you've threatened to kill somebody, that a protective order through the court should be put in place to make sure that you don't have access to weapons. The only place that that's not completely agreed by by the vast majority is in Congress. And to have a well-regulated militia and to respect the rights of gun owners does not mean that we need to have irresponsible gun policies. And that, unfortunately, is a very hard sell here in the United States. And I would be in favor of responsible gun policies that respected the rights of gun owners, training requirements would be, I think, a good step. But it's difficult. I wish I could give you a stronger answer, but the first step is going to be getting a consensus in Southern Indiana that this is in everybody's best interest.
So kind of follow up to that, if like 80% of the population agrees that yes, we need to have sensible gun laws, safety, that kind of thing. It seems to me, like you said, Congress is the only one in disagreement.
Yep.
It feels like a lot of the reason that Congress is in disagreement is because the NRA owns them. And they can't afford to do what the people want because there's so much donation and so much just them being bought basically from those type of either the NRA or their corporations. So, could things be changed in that respect to help with the gun policy stuff?
Yes, and I'll tell you, there was a question earlier about would I accept money from APAC or a director, and I think an indirect question as well. I think another good question is, are you going to accept money from the NRA? And the answer is no. I think that question needs to be asked of all Congress people, all people running for office, so that they're on the record. With Citizens United, it's increasingly hard, but even before Citizens United, it was hard, and the NRA had enormous sway. I think that it begins with being able to have a real and honest discussion with people without the histrionics of around the gun discussion and debate. It's really hard, and I'm committed to helping us move forward. But we have to move forward together. Given that 80% of people are in favor of some really common sense things, that we need to start with that.
Other question? Would you have? Is there another one online?
You have another one online?
Sorry. Got 47 different screens going.
Sorry. Here.
Ruth would like some clarification about who exactly your top donors are, unrelated to APAC.
They're all individuals. This is very much there's a lady in the audience, I don't know if you saw on the camera, that raised her hand, but they are all individuals. That is the only money that I have taken at this point. Now, that information, and I'm not going to out them on the screen, but all that information is available on the FEC website, and you can look at what my money, where my money's coming from, and it's all individuals.
So often we watch the political, commercials and hear candidates speak, and they talk about what they're going to do to make things better. And earlier this week, as we were sitting in our safe place, hoping the tornadoes didn't hit us, it kind of clicked with me, and I got thinking back to 2012 when the tornadoes came through. And I think it's a fair analogy that when we look at our country, and anybody that's ever been through a tornado knows that the first thing you do when you get out of a tornado is you don't start building things. You start cleaning up before you can start to repair. With that analogy in place, considering the Trump tornado that has come through our country, what do you think needs to be fixed or cleaned up before we can actually start moving forward with some of the strategies that we have in mind?
So we have to begin with the systemic issues. And the systemic issue is the division of responsibility and oversight for Congress. Really, Congress has to start doing their job, right? And we have to put back in the inspectors general, We have to put back in the oversight. We have to put back in the systems that provide good information for people to make good decisions. And I like your analogy, or at least I want to purpose it to my purposes, right? It's to say that one of the things that people are saying somewhat reflexively is we've got this big mess and we've got to clean it up and we got to rebuild it. And I don't want to go back. I mean, if we've gone through all of this and we just go turn the clock back and say everything's the way it was 2 years ago, 2 years ago was not as great as, I mean, it's better than it is now, but 2 years ago, we still had real problems. We had the systemic problems. When she talks about, young people being disillusioned and not voting, those problems didn't happen just in the last 18 months. They got dramatically worse, but they've been building for decades. So once you clear away the debris, you check to see what is structurally sound, and then you say, how am I going to rebuild this? What is this going to look like? And sometimes you just put the roof back on and put the insulation and the drywall up and you say, done, it looks like it used to. But I think that there's going to need to be some changes as a result of the damage, and one of them, frankly, is on the international front. Our relationships have been so damaged by this administration that we're not going to go back to where we were 2 years ago. We need to start thinking about how we're going to lead and demonstrate leadership on the international stage. And there's going to be some structural changes in that relationship because of a lack of trust.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh.
I don't know if it's a question as much as kind of a follow-up thought. It's almost like Congress is trying to be a parliament instead of a Congress. And maybe Congress needs to go back to school and take government lessons and find out what the difference is between, Trump's in charge and we're doing what he says. No, you're your own separate branch of government. But I'm thinking about how different it was when the Senate would confirm the Supreme Court nominee or a cabinet person by a vote of 80 or 90 instead of 51. And could Congress maybe have a conversation about that? Not an argument, not a vote, but just can we talk about what it was like back when we agreed on somebody that we could all agree about? And maybe if Washington could get on board with, let's pick somebody that we all agree is competent instead of somebody that we can get 51 votes for, maybe things would be a little different.
So the problem, I think you are correct, and I will say that the problem is deeper than that, in that this is not just Congress is intentionally enabling this administration. This is not just a matter of them saying, well, I'm afraid of Trump, and we would like to believe, and we wish we could believe that the people like Aaron Houchin that I'll be running against is just too afraid to speak out and do and act in our best interest instead of this administration's. She's part of it. This is not an accidental thing. This is not just, and this is why it is so important. Trump is the figurehead and he's the leader, and you can call him whatever you want, and a lot of people have, but it's not just Trump. When Trump is out of the political process, all of these people that have been pushing for this are still here. They're still part of it. Congress is doing what they want to do. And the difference between this administration and previous administrations that you were talking about is this administration is all about the naked use of brutal power, an absolute power. It is all about power. It is not about trying to find the best path for the nation. It is about, this is what I want to do, and how do I force it to happen? And so it's not that they don't understand. It's that they are directly complicit. It is bigger than just that. This is why we have to take back the House. Okay. You had something you wanted to follow up on?
Yeah, I think to your point about the tornado analogy, it seems like so many of these issues are because the same people are just year after year, decade after decade in the position of power, especially in Congress. So curious what your positions are on things like, I mean, I don't know, age limits, term limits, even the ability to profit while you are in Congress with the stock market, having insider information, those type of things, because it seems like people are making these decisions to become career politicians. To your point, what you were saying about this administration, it's about power, it's about what's best for them rather than their people. So having guardrails like term limits or not being able to invest in the stock market while you're in Congress, I'm not sure what other options are, but just curious, speaking of rebuilding, what could we do in those situations to kind of rebuild what we have?
So I don't think that people in Congress should be allowed to invest in individual stocks or in stock sectors, right? So if you're in Congress and you're voting for war, you shouldn't be allowed to buy stocks in the military sector, right? You should be allowed, like anyone else, to put money into your 401k and investment vehicle on mutual stocks that are tied to the index funds. Index funds, I think that's fair game, but anything below that, I think, should not be allowed because it allows for manipulation for your own profit. It allows for manipulation for your friends as well, right? Age limits, so an 85-year-old person that is sharp and experienced can do a lot of good, right? And if you look at the distribution of people that vote, there are, in fact, more people at least in the primary, that are over 80 that vote than under 34, right? Older people are very active politically, okay? So I'm not big on just basing it based on age. You can talk about, are you mentally capable? And then you get into the thing, Trump would never let me or any other Democrat be, labeled as mentally capable. So again, because of trust issues, I don't know about that. The last thing that a lot of people talk about are term limits. And there's pluses and minuses. And what I say is that the reason that term limits are useful is that it breaks the lock that you've been in office and you've got a home field advantage, right? So the problem is that if you put term limits in and say you can only be in for 6 years as a congressman, by the time you get really good at it and you've been able to work your way into the system and understand how things work and make things happen, you're no longer available. The only people that know how the system really works are going to be the lobbyists. So then you go, well, poop, what do you do? My suggestion is that you have, that you're allowed to run for a certain number of consecutive terms, and then you have to sit out for at least one term, and you can't run. So that brings a new person in, which it breaks the lock. So,
I'm going to keep the tornado
okay,
analogy going because
all right.
it's been effective. So for actual tornadoes, hurricanes, snowstorms, it seems like, globally, we've been experiencing the 100-year fill in the blank, right? This is going to happen only once in 100 years. And now it's happening every year. We've had to replace our roof on our home twice in the past 5 years because of hail storms. My deductible now is, no pun intended, through the roof because of that. It's no longer $1,000. It's, 10% of my home. So I think all of that ties into climate change, from the storms, that kind of thing, from a weather perspective, as well as clean air, clean water, or lack thereof. So could you talk a little about what your policies would be, your stance on climate change and what we would do to help?
So climate change is real. We don't need another study to tell us that climate change is real. If we wanted to have another study, a lot of that data has been removed. At least one satellite has been decommissioned, so we can't get the data to do another study, even if we wanted to. This really comes down to people in power trying to perpetuate the power and position of the fossil fuel industry. And now it's gone from something that didn't make sense environmentally to something that doesn't make sense in any way. They've cut back on the controls, or they're cutting back on the controls and oversight for coal-fired power plants, which I know they're popular in Indiana. But the fact is, coal-powered power plants, that electricity is more expensive than renewable. So you can't say that it makes economic sense, and you can't say that it makes environmental sense. So the only thing that makes sense to me is that somebody is getting rich off this deal, and it's not us. Right? So I think we're at about time. Last call. I know you've been thinking. You're good? All right. All right.
I think one
One
thing
last
just to
question.
mention, no King's marches are coming up.
That's
on
right.
Saturday, the 28th of March. I think that every county in the district except one or two are hosting one, and some have combined into multiple counties that are smaller. So I don't know if you want to just say a few words about those upcoming
Well,
rallies.
you've been scheduling. Why don't you tell them where I'll be?
So Brad, you can see Brad at, he's going to ping pong around Southern Indiana. He's going to be at the New Albany protest and rally, and then he's going to the one in Corydon, and then back to Clark County here for the one in Jeffersonville. So he's going to have some speaking time in each one of those and have a bunch of folks supporting him in those rallies. I know that the one in Corydon is collecting, it's all posted on their sites, collecting hygiene items for anyone that goes to that. And the one in Jeffersonville, they are collecting specific food donations for those, if anyone is going to attend those rallies. That's what
Very
they're
good.
looking for.
Very good. Well, I'd like to thank all of you for being here, and I'd like to thank you guys for watching. And we've got a couple more of these that we'll have, and you can see on our website and on Facebook where those next ones will be. So thank you.